All right. Apparently, we are live now. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome here on my Facebook Live. For those of you that don't have time to watch it now, put a point on this. Make sure that you come back to my page because we're going to keep this in its recorded form for a long time. Who I have with me today is a most remarkable guest. This is Bob Kramer. Bob Kramer is incredibly famous for the fact that he has created, in my view, some of the most astonishing knives in my life. I'm 62 years old, and it's taken me that long to understand what was that I found the first time that I held one of his knives in my hand. People say, oh, come on, you say that just to say. We'll show you in details my love and my specification of it. But while I'm so fiery in talking about the incredible beauty of a knife and how a knife, a tool that we use every day. Ciao Amalia, come stai? Hi Lisa, hi Richard, hi Peter. Sorry guys, so many of you are popping in. And the most beautiful thing that I want you to know is that these knives are coming from the quiet storm of true beauty and strength that lies within a most common, down-to-earth man that I've never spoken to. As you can see on the screen next to me, that is Mr. Bob Kramer. Bob, why don't we do this? So let me introduce you briefly to all my viewers so that they get to see you and they get to know who you are. Hey, Anthony, how you doing? Hi, Denise. And why don't you tell us a little bit about you? At this point, all that I want to know from you is, for how many years have you been a professional knife maker?
30 years.
30?
30 years.
Madonna. Yep. And the first time that you felt that you wanted to make a knife, do you remember what struck you from the inside and made you feel, this is it, I'm going to make my own? And what was the small series of patterns that followed through until you first, for the first time, got involved in that?
Yeah, so I had been a professional knife sharpener for 5 years. And I used to sharpen at all of the fishmongers and butchers and restaurants around Seattle. And I saw an opportunity, I saw an ad in a magazine to learn how to hand forge knives. And I always considered that because I was the knife sharpener, the guy that came in the back of your restaurant, that spoke to the chef, that spoke to anyone who was working in the kitchen, and they would ask me questions about the knife. Why does this knife stay sharper longer than this knife? And I felt that because it was my job, I should know the answer. So when I had an opportunity to learn how to hand forge a knife, I took the opportunity. I flew to Arkansas, and we had to fire up a coal forge and put a piece of steel in and hand forge this steel. So I've always been a little bit of a fire bug. I like to play with fire. I like to hit things with a hammer. But it was just, there was an excitement there that I was making a tool. I think this is one of man's, oldest crafts, is to make a tool. So I was used to working in a restaurant where you would make a meal. It might take a couple of days to put the meal together between the stocks and roasting the bones. Right. But then the food, you present it and it's gone. And you begin again. You make another dish. When I was making a knife, I made that knife and it would last, hopefully 20, 30, maybe 100 years.
Well, I want you to know that I have people that already asked me to write a will and specifically assign to them my knives by the time I go. Your knives have become, for all of you watching me at home and right now looking at it, not being familiar with Bob's work, I brought some of my knives. And I will come and I'll show you on the camera, and I hope that the camera can capture. This is an 8-inch knife. It's a Damascus pattern, as you can see, this beautiful waving, which requires an extreme amount of work to achieve it and a certain amount of mastery to be able to get to this point, especially in a production point. I'll explain more to that. The thing that I love is that the top of it, the spine of it, is smooth and rounded. So when you help yourself with the hand, you're always landing in a safe spot. But the thing that makes this knife spectacular, more than anything else you've ever seen, is, first and foremost, the shape of the blade. A lot of people say, the shape, you make a knife, it cuts, it's good. No, the shape, the way in which the bow runs underneath, the small tiny indentation here for your finger to allow you to either go on a pinch grip or have this secure lock on the knife as you go into the cutting that you do. This knife is a tool that talks to you without speaking English. It's an instinctual thing that comes into your head. And when my hand rests upon this, and this is the most important part of the knife, in spite of the fact that this blade is miraculous, the handle sits in my hand and says, come on, let's go. Let's make something happen. And as you've seen on all the posts that I've done on Instagram and Facebook, this knife has brought me great glory, and it's a great participant in my show. So what I want to ask you now, and I'm going to put you on the spot, Mr. Kramer.
Yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Mr. Kramer.
Do it.
I know for a fact some of your most prestigious knives, the ones that you make customs for the collectors that know you as the artist that you are, the commission from you work as, Caravaggio and Michelangelo were once in the old days, asked and commissioned by the great forces of the politics and entertainment of the day. I hear that in the custom work, your knives go for north of $30,000 a time. Is that correct?
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes.
Now, for all of you that see me wave this knife around, which is the Damascus, which is a more expensive line that's created by the Kramer with the association that they have with Zwilling, this one right now is anywhere around $500. This is the deal of the century. But here comes the very difficult question.
Yeah.
How it happens that something that you so meticulously do inside your studio, you're able to converse with another artist who is in another factory in charge of a series of another platoon of artists, pretty much the same way in which a restaurant works, and you're able to collaborate in such a close association that as I look at the details of this blade, just in the shape alone, and the handle formation, just in the shape alone, I see this almost twin-like performance to the high-end knives that you construct. Now, those are requested with special metals. There's a lot of artistic incisions on them that are completely different ballgame.
Yeah.
But how were you able to communicate like this, especially with people from Japan?
Well, so there are great craftsmen in Japan, and they've been making knives for a very long time, and their level of craftsmanship is incredibly high. I would say they're probably the best knife makers in the world. And there's still a tremendous amount of craftsmanship and craftspeople in the factories. So Zwilling is a German company. They've been making knives for 275 years. And so the Germans are known for their engineering. They just are meticulous about all the details. So Zwilling owns the factory in Japan. So we have Germans, we have German engineering, we have Japanese craftsmanship, and we have the advantage of being able to send technical drawings via the internet. So I can send a computer drawing where we have mapped out all the shapes and the sizes and the details directly to Japan. So, within a couple of minutes, they receive a full-blown drawing, and then they can make a prototype, send it to me. I can look at the prototype. If anything needs to be modified, we can make slight modifications before they go into production. So it's probably easier today than at any other time in the history of the world to be able to make these.
Modest, by the way, because one of the things that you're leaving out is that this is your knife. This is your invention, and it is. I don't know of anyone else that has a similar blade to yours. And you are so generous that you actually give the recipe away to somebody else down to the very specifics, trusting that they will execute according to your vision. And I think from what I have in my hand, I think that this must have been an amazing marriage, and you must have had a skill of collaboration that is very seldom seen on very high-end individuals of your worth in terms of the artistic achievements.
Yeah, a great collaboration. And some of the input was put in by the Japanese engineers. So there are certain things we have to figure out. How are we going to pull this off? How do we get a beautiful pattern that they can make multiples of? So it's completely different to do a production run than it is to do one-offs. What I do in the shop is a one-off piece.
Yeah.
And that requires a different sort of approach or mentality, but they have to make hundreds or thousands of knives and make them consistent, and that's an incredible skill set that they have. So it was absolutely a collaboration on both of our parts.
I want you to know that I called all my chef friends, and I got a lot of them, and I told them you're on the show, and I say it's on my show, not on yours. It's on my show, and everybody was so jealous, so jealous. you have no idea how much so many of us follow you and really in love with your product. But I'm going to use your brain to actually give an answer to a question that came through the mail. And the question, I think, is going to be, hey, Jeff, Brian Costa, mamma mia, quante persone. We have a ton of people watching this thing. And then we just got started. So the question is this. If I am about to buy a good knife for the first time,
yeah,
and I'm talking about not a chef, I'm talking an everyday mom and dad, regular jobs and, regular people like we are in other things that is not cooking or making knives. What would you say would be a good knife shape to start with? And what would you recommend in terms of what to look for? And you can mention brands. I got no limitation. Whatever you want to say, it's fine. I just want to give these people a good bit of guidance in their shopping experience, especially now with the holidays coming.
Yeah. So I think the chef's knife is my go-to. If I could only have one knife in the kitchen, it would be a chef's knife. And this is a 10-inch, but that shape, that knife that you just showed,
basically, put it on hand.
Yeah, that's 8-inch chef's. So if you just had one knife, you can actually accomplish almost everything in the kitchen with this one knife. Now, an 8 might be too big for some people. The most important thing is that you feel comfortable with the knife in your hand. You shouldn't be intimidated. You should feel comfortable. So for some people, they may be a little bit smaller in stature. The 8-inch chef's may be too much knife, and you might want a 6-inch. My wife prefers a 6-inch chef's knife. I go for the 8. But if I'm going to make food for a lot of people, let's say we have 10 people over, I'll probably use a 10-inch chef's knife, simply because I can cut bigger piles of food. I can cook and prepare more quickly. So my go-to would be an 8-inch chef's knife. Now, as far as quality goes, I think the easiest thing to do is to go with a reputable manufacturer like Zwilling. They've been making knives for a very long time. If it's made by a manufacturer that maybe you've never heard of before, it may look like a good knife, but there are features and qualities that you can't tell.
You are so nice. Allow me to be the bad guy here.
Okay.
Forget what he said right now, because I buy everything.
Yeah.
I buy high-end knives. I buy medium. I buy sometimes I see something that pops on the internet that looks exactly like this great knife I've been after for a fraction of the price, and I'm thinking, what am I, stupid? It looks the same. Yeah. Well, I'm going to look right at the camera. Everybody, look at my eyes. It's not the same. It is not the same. You deserve what you pay for. So one of the most important things is that a knife is not defined by a shape, meaning that you can see a shape like this by many other makers. A slicer is not an unusual knife. This one is a more particular knife that Mr. Kramer has created. I don't know if I said it correctly. Meiji is the name of the collection. Meiji. This one is also made by Zwilling, but is made in Japan at the factories that they own in Japan. They've acquired quite a bit of Japanese knife business. Actually, the Zwilling also acquired Henkel's, which at the time used to be one of the biggest competitors. The thing of this knife is the soft pattern that he has in here, and the blade. The blade that you have in this knife will never allow you to buy another knife from another maker ever again, because this knife floats through whatever it is that you're cutting and that you're slicing. And this particular handle that you see imitated and photographed all the way around, I have 10 knives that I gave in gift to my neighbors, to my friends, to my cousins, because I want nothing to do with them. And they looked exactly like this. And they were for a tiny portion of what the price of this was. And when you get it, you realize that one thing is to have the real thing on hand. And the other thing, unfortunately, is to get a cheap imitation. So I endorse everything that you're saying, sir. And it is true. Sometimes the commercials make these things look as if they're the best quality ever, and they're not.
Right. I think you get what you pay for. And it is impossible to cut corners or to sell a knife for like a quarter of the price of that knife. It's impossible to do. You can't manufacture them. The steel is expensive. The craftsmanship is expensive. And the time that you have to put in to manufacture that knife, it's expensive. And so it's an expensive knife. But it will last forever.
You don't... Nobody lives forever, but I believe that these knives will they'll come with me to the other side when I go, because they're my weapons. I was meant to wear those knives on the side of my hips. If I could take them with me to a business meeting, I would. Unfortunately, I'm afraid I'm actually using them improperly at that point. Henceforth, Given that, yeah, truly, I'm Sicilian. I got a temper. Can you imagine that happening? No, no, no knives. Actually, I have to pay you a big compliment. You don't see this, but I have it. I have a scroll of people that are saying their comments. I want to say hi to Denise Moore, to Amalia Django, to Nancy Levine, to Esther Lopez, to Anthony Dauphin. And one of the one of the comments that came in is, this man should approach the company that has created a show called Masterclass, which I think is a web-driven series of teaching documentaries. And they should actually make a deal with you so you could teach us how to make the knives. Because you do have quite a bit of people that are very familiar with you. I'm going to ask you something that it's got nothing to do with knives. If you were to make something quick, you and your wife, what is the favorite food that you like to make that it's not complicated, you and her both like it, and it's just a lovely evening together? What would you make?
Well, one of my favorite dishes is tenderloin. So filet mignon, smoke it until the internal temperature comes up to about 90, 95 degrees. Saute a bunch of mushrooms, bring the steak back in from the smoker, give it a hard sear on either side, some Roquefort cheese on the top, mushrooms underneath, maybe deglaze with a little red wine, some butter, roasted asparagus. How's that?
Okay. For everybody who had breakfast this morning and then they had the same thing on lunch made of a bagel with a piece of ham on top of it, this is how this guy eats. This is how you become successful. You eat real food. That is awesome. I mean, really, because actually, I can see that as you were actually talking about what you're making, I can see the steps in your head. You already have it so precise, 90 degrees on the inside. Then I make these mushrooms. Then I finish it with the mushroom. Then I do the red wine sauce. And they're very, very, I like the way you think. All right, let's get another question from one of our viewers. Let's see here. Well, actually, Bob, this I think is right up your alley, and I'm going to read it exactly for what it is. So Frank wrote, what inspires the creation of these knives, and what is that keeps you excited in wanting to making them?
Okay. These knives were inspired from my experience in the kitchen. So when I learned to make knives and I began to make knives, I thought, for all of those years that I spent in the kitchen cutting every day for 6 or 7 hours, what are the features that I liked and didn't like from the knives that I owned? So what you see is the reduction of that experience between my knife making and my time in the kitchen. As far as what inspires me today, it can be anything. It can be everything. I'm always looking for something that sort of sparks my imagination. It could be a tile on the floor of a restaurant. It could be a mosaic tile or a pattern. And I wonder if that's a beautiful pattern. I wonder if I can make that in steel. I wonder if I can manipulate the steel to put that pattern in the steel. We finished a piece recently that was inspired by M.C. Escher, the great illustrator and painter. And we looked at that pattern. I've always liked his work ever since I was a kid. And I collaborate with 2 other people here. And we looked at that and studied it and said, can we do that in steel? And so that was the goal. And it took us maybe a month or so before we could build the piece. But it's here. So you can see some of the horses are Damascus and some of the horses are pure nickel or high nickel, high carbon. And that pattern goes right through the blade. You can see the horses wrap around on the backside of the blade.
So, my skillful interpretation of this is based on ignorance. So I must qualify myself before I pop a compliment out. The only thing that I know about Damascus is what I read on the internet.
Yeah.
And what I saw on the show that they have on TV on the History Channel. That right now I forget the title of it. And when I see them making the Damascus, they make it with the can. I see these poor guys just trying to get a pattern. Here, not only you get a pattern, right, you got it precisely aligned and totally wrapped up, which makes me think that this pattern becomes a reality into the first incinerations of the metal as the metal comes together into the various layers. And you have the ability to create a design pattern within the context of the Damascus flow.
Yeah.
Do I understand this correctly?
Yes. Yeah, you do.
Right on.
Yeah. Control.
That is impressive to me. I mean, wow. Wow.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm good at cooking, but I'm not even coming close to anything like that. I mean, that is amazing. How did you come up with that idea? How did you envision the technicality of being able to transport a design through all the layers and maintain it into its finished form in its functional idea that originally was what you had in mind?
So this is the result of probably of 30 years of working. And then in the shop, I work with another master smith, Tom Ferry, who also has 25 years experience. And so we just put our heads together and we try to figure out new ways to combine things. And we always do the what if. What if we could place a fish inside a Damascus pattern? Is that possible? And then we try to engineer how we could do that. At some point, somebody thought, I wonder if I could take a turkey and stuff a duck inside and stuff a chicken inside. And they said, well, let's try.
You're awesome. You're awesome.
Freeze, whatever. So that's what we do, is just try to come up with an idea and then execute it. And we've thrown lots of steel away. We've made lots of...
I'm sure. So. No, but that's how you come up with ideas. People always write me compliments and say I'm a great chef. Trust me, I am a good chef. But if they only see how much food I burn before I get to the right recipe, and sometimes it's more of this, less of that, the heat higher, the heat lower, and you gotta make mistakes, otherwise you don't learn. I mean, one of the things that people say to me, I hate to make mistakes. I go, well, but if you don't try and you never make a mistake, you're worthless to me, because first, the sense of courage that it takes in trying something new, even if you're uncomfortable with it, but you're so enthusiastic about it that you want to learn. You fall down, you get up, you try to understand what didn't work, you ask the advice, the teachings of others that bring you in, and pretty soon you're going to have a series of mentors around you that are going to try to guide you. And if you have the proper talent, within a certain time you bypass your mentors, but never lose the respect for who you are, where you come from, and the importance of the knowledge that was given to you. One of the things that I want to ask you, and I want to bring back in our conversation, was for people to understand this. The handle on the Miji, sorry, I got to figure out the right way to do it. Yeah. Was this your idea, or was this a collaboration that you had with your Japanese? Because it's not a European handle that I can recall, even the Portuguese had some strange handles in the past, but nothing that came to this. And this one has a rib that has a downward lip, so that no matter where I grab it from, it connects with the inter channels on my knuckles. Somebody put a ton of thought in this. How did this come about?
So this is a variation of a traditional Japanese style handle. So the Japanese have a very subtle kind of point or ridge on their knives. And it's to let you know when you pick the knife up, when you feel that ridge, that you've got the blade in the right direction. In other words, that the edge is not up. So if the slicer, like a yanagiba, like a sushi knife, is sitting on the counter and you're prepping your fish and you reach and grab the knife, as soon as you feel that ridge, you know you have the knife in the right attitude to come in and make a slice. Now, the Japanese handles tend to be too small for my hands. I don't have terribly big hands, but the Japanese handles are very tiny. So when I love the Japanese aesthetic and profile, and so that slicer has a Japanese profile like a sashimi knife, but it's a Western blade. It's ground on both sides. It makes it easier to sharpen, and you can slice more things than you can slice with just a sashimi knife. When it came to the handle, I knew I had to make the handle slightly bigger to be more comfortable for me, and the ridge more pronounced. It was intuitive.
Every detail has a significant importance. That's what I try to tell people. The recipes that we have today in our kitchen are the results of experimentations of thousands of years before us. It's not like somebody one day woke up and say, oh, I'm going to invent how to make meatballs.
Yeah.
With all due respect. And there's always a different way of making meatballs. And I see it because I try it. The ones that I make, the ones that my friends make. But it's very rare, I think, for an artist of your caliber to actually confess to the exploratory process that it takes and the understanding of a collaborative exchange of ideas between alike minds, and how to find a series of creases that fits the tradition of something that yet has not been produced. Anyway, I have a question here from Carmine Marcello. He is a metal worker, a blacksmith, and he is curious to know as to what grade of steel you're using. And he also would like to know, how do you fold the steel to create a blade? Oh, no, sorry. How much do you fold the steel to create a blade? I'm reading this, but I'm not quite sure I know what I'm saying.
Okay, so the steel that I got known for is a bearing steel, like ball bearings. Like in the wheels of your car, there are ball bearings that support and roll the vehicle. It's a steel that's called 52-100. That's just the engineering title that they give it. But it's a beautiful steel, and then it's hard and it's tough and it's resilient and it takes a wicked edge. So that's the steel that I started with for all of my kitchen knives. In the Damascus knives that we make steel from scratch in the shop. So I start with pure iron, I add carbon, I add manganese and chrome, just like I'm baking cupcakes or making a cake. So everything gets weighed out. So if you think about, you want to buy bread, and you go to the grocery store, and there's 5 different kinds of bread, but none of it's like bread, like beautiful, crusty, delicious bread. And so you have to go to the bakery, and hopefully the bakery makes this beautiful bread.
Correct.
But if you're to make bread at home, now you can control all of the elements. You can choose the wheat that you want, how much salt, if there's any salt on top. Am I putting rosemary inside? So we make steel from scratch so that I can control everything. So it's as if you had a huge garden and you grew all the vegetables that you wanted for your restaurant. So that's the 2 kinds of steel that we use. As far as the folding and how much, that is relative to what you want the end product to look like. So if I'm making something that looks more like a Japanese piece, like a Japanese sword, I'll fold it many more times. So maybe there'll be 1,500 layers of steel, so that it almost you can't see any layering. It's like croissant dough. There's so many layers in there.
Allow me to understand the folding that you're doing, and you're naming the amount of times. What effect does the continuous folding have on the stainless steel blade that you're discussing? Does it make it more flexible? Does it make it stronger? What does it do for you?
It's some of it homogenizes the steel, like you're kneading dough. You know, if you just put the ingredients together in a bowl and mix it, you don't quite have bread yet. You have to integrate and develop the gluten.
Correct.
Sometimes when we're making steel, we need to redistribute the carbon and make sure it's homogeneous. So that's one of the reasons for the folding. And historically, it was to clean the steel and to make it stronger. Today, the steel is so clean that we make, or the steel that we buy from industry is so clean that we are folding to create patterns. It's aesthetic. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just amazing to understand that. And all of this you've acquired, basically, you're self-taught. It's not like you went to school early in your youth. You're already a man by the time you started, falling into the passion of wanting to learn through the experience that you had. Wow, this is a remarkable thing, because I asked things that I didn't understand, and I had to admit it to you. I'm asking something that someone else wrote, but I don't understand what I'm saying. Thank you for being so kind and so precise. I want to give a hand to everybody that carries your knives, because I want for everybody who's listening to the show to understand, my recommendation is this. If you're going to buy something that's going to be a tool that accompanies you for the most part of your life, it should be something that you love.
Yeah.
And you know what? Life is not that easy for any of us right now. I mean, look around. Let's not go into details. We don't need to. We're here to smile together. But I tell you this one thing. After I'm done with this, I'm going downstairs. I'm making meatballs. I got to chop onions. I got all sorts of things to do. I'm going to be using one of those knives.
Yes.
When I use those knives, I feel, for me, that, and I have a collection of knives, and eventually this might also happen to you, I feel like it's an extension of me, where my mind and the extension of me carries me through the culinary dream that I have. And it creates this sense of joy, of passion. Yeah. If you do not own a knife that makes you feel this way, you need to look for Bob Kramer's knives. So I showed you the most expensive knives. This is one of these least expensive. I think that this one right now, you can get it at zwilling.com. And Zwilling put the search Bob Kramer because the company owns an enormous amount of knife makers, and Bob is amongst the premier on the higher end. You have to put his name, and it will show you all of what they have. In the lower end of the price point is the stainless steel. Right now, for example, I think I checked it right before the show. You can buy an 8-inch from the stainless steel collection, regular chef knife for around $160, $159, which I think is one of the best things you guys could ever do for yourself. If you don't go out there and get the darn knife, you're knuckleheads. That being said, where should you find this knife? So zwilling.com is one way to go at it. You put a search on amazon.com, you look under the name Bob Kramer Knives, you'll see all of the various retailers that have it. I think to remember the Sur La Table also has it, and Sur La Table also has wonderful sales right before the holidays. Stay with them. Are you also Williams and Sonoma by any chance?
I don't know. Actually.
I don't know either. And the other one that you can go to, there's this other guy out of Illinois. This guy is crazy. It's called Cutlery and More.
Yeah.
Cutleryandmore.com. And he has knives from all over the world. And I must say that the majority of my knives, I bought it from him because he seems to scale down the best prices possible. I got no association with the gentleman. I just love the way in which he does his business. The return policy is very liberal. And that's one of the things that you guys want to get engaged with, the return policy. If you buy something that you need to be afraid that to try something new, it's cost you, the shipping cost, this, that, you need to put that in consideration. These knives are investments. Those are not things with coins that fall out of your pockets. You're going to buy something like this, it's going to be your pride and joy. If you pay 150, if you pay 500, that is the kind of mental thought that you need to have. So when you go at it, you also want to go with a company that allows you to experience it, to keep it in your hand and return if you feel it's not valid. I have not returned a single thing, period. I love these guys. And whoever comes to the house, I'll give them cash, but the knives, they stay with me. They stay with me. So if I was you, as a matter of fact, and you're afraid of a big knife and you always use small knives, on the stainless steel connection right now, there's a big, huge sale going at Cutlery and More, where your 3-inch, 3.5-inch, and your 5-inch are going sub, I think, $120 and $150 each. Discounted down into the 80s and 90s. And I would propose that you guys do it. Why? I'm not a passionate man about small paring knives. I'm one of those guys that was very macho. The bigger the knife, the more important I am. But then there are some points where you got to get in. And this big knife goes nowhere. You need to have the small blade. For all you guys who think that strength is everything, strength is nothing. It's thought and the ability to adapt to the situation. And the short knives that Mr. Kramer has made, which I bought very happily, and giving me the ability to really go to each one of the jobs that I want with peace, flow, and at the same time, huge joy for me. So I would say this, if you are a person of a certain mature age and you're tired to settle for crap in your life, I cannot help you with everything around you, but I can tell you this. Go to any of the retailers that I mentioned, zwilling.com, Sur La Table, Cutlery and More, search for Bob Kramer knife. The lowest the cost is on the stainless steel. I invite you to purchase the stainless steel just to get an experience of what it is. And here's the trick question, Mr. Kramer. It's coming to you.
Yeah.
Oh, you thought it was going to be easy, did you? But I'm an inquisitive journalist. And here comes the question.
Yeah.
Now, this is also for me to understand. The stainless steel, right out of the box, has a sharper blade than the Damascus had out of the box.
Yeah.
I found that this rocking Santoku in stainless, in terms of immediate excitement, on the sharpness and the flow, it's more significant than the Damascus. Is it that I just got two knives that just happen to be that way, or is there a specific reason for that?
I would say there's probably a specific reason. So the stainless Damascus, the core steel, the cutting steel that's between those beautiful outer layers, is a material that's called SG2. It's a very sophisticated stainless steel, and it holds an edge for a very long time. Now, the reason it holds an edge is because of all the elements that are in the steel, but it won't get quite as sharp as the stainless, the plain stainless Damascus steel. That material was engineered for razor blades. So, you know, it takes an incredibly sharp edge. and it's also slightly easier to sharpen, but it won't hold the edge as long.
I
So
understand.
yeah,
I
something
understand.
like Damascus, that really beautiful exterior, and they don't want to sharpen very often. So that's what the Damascus stainless is all about. And you lose a little tiny bit of the keenness, that wickedly sharp edge. If you want straight performance, you don't care about the look or the outside, and you want something that's easy to sharpen, stainless Damascus is a great way to go.
Well, I remind everybody again, on sale, Cutlery and some and all the other ones that I mentioned. 159 is the 8 inches. I just double checked it on the internet while we were talking. I want to make sure I wasn't lying to anybody. And the 6 inch that I also possess, it was my very first acquisition, by the way. Yeah. Yes, it was. And I bought it at full price. But you and I get it on discount now. And then from what I see, it's, what is it? 129. And those are knives that I would call for you as risk-free, because you got to be attentive to one thing, and I got to give you a warning. I got to give you a warning. You know, when you buy crap, it's easy to toss it away, and you lose no sleep over it. But if you buy this knife, and you think you can go and buy another knife, it's not going to go that way. After your knives, I bought 13 other different knives, from high-end to stuff that I saw on the internet that just fascinated me because the commercial was good. At the moment, I possess none of those knives. I gave them all away because I decided that I only have so much time in my kitchen. And when I'm in the kitchen, I need to be happy. And it's not just the food that makes me happy. I think it's everything. It's the process. It's the ceremony. It's the music in the background, the glass of wine, my wife standing next to me, us telling a story of what happened throughout the day, my cats coming in between my legs and me talking to them, me giving them taste of this and that. You know, I'm a regular guy, just like you are at home. And in that moment, I feel so fortunate that maybe this year has been the most tremendous and worst economic year that most of us has faced. But while I'm holding the knife, I feel I'm slashing right through as if I'm this mysterious Superman. And I play these things in my head. I know, it sounds crazy, but this is how it works in my head. And these knives help me. Now, I was always a kid with a lot of fantasious outcomes. And, you know, as a matter of fact, my mom once found a report card from the nun for the first 5 years I went to nun school. She says, he's a good boy, but he's always dreaming. I don't think he listens to anything. There were some issues among a possible failing in developmental. Let's see, there's another question I have. Mr. Brian Costa, I'm going to read this out because I don't quite understand what he's asking for, so maybe you can help me. Brian is writing, Nick, I have a question. Should you buy Eastern or Western style? Eastern's knives are sharp only on one side of the blade, and they have a round handle, and the tang blade are two separate pieces. Oh, I understand. He's referring to the Japanese style versus the style that we are discussing right now, where the blade is on both sides.
Yeah.
Which one do you prefer? And would you also help us understand why the Japanese tradition is so keen on a single side of the blade versus both?
Yeah. So my suggestion would be buy Western style knives, unless there's something specific within the Japanese cuisine that you feel like preparing. The Western style blades are much easier to sharpen, they're more durable, and they're just friendlier for many cutting situations. The Japanese are very specific and incredibly focused on achieving the highest of whatever the craft is. So these knives are designed that they're, you know, when they're ground on one side, that's a right-handed knife. So you need to be right-handed. A Japanese knife for a left-handed person is ground on the other side, and they're more difficult to find. But they're made for a specific purpose. So a sashimi knife is just meant for cutting raw fish, period. It's not supposed to cut anything else, just raw fish. There's another knife called a deba. It looks like a chef's knife. It's for filleting flat fish. It's not a chef's knife. You will be disappointed if you try to use it for cutting and chopping or mincing garlic. The other thing about Japanese knives is they have a tendency to be extremely fragile. The edge, the steel is so hard, it's like glass. So they're incredibly easy to chip unless you are kind of trained and know how to use them or are exceedingly careful.
And here I thought, it's just stainless steel. It's a chef knife. That's it.
Yeah.
There's a whole story to every single detail of every bit of the material that goes inside and the thought process. that brings it. Help us understand something. There's a lot of advertisement. Brian, I hope you enjoy that. Hi, Bonnie. Hi, Christina. Brian, what I wanted to ask you, there is a lot of definitions on the angling of the blade, 16 degrees, 12 degrees, 9 degrees. Can you help us understand what does it mean to us, the consumer at home, when we look at the angulature of a blade as a piece of a feature of the blade that we want to purchase?
So the edge, needs to be relative to the quality of the blade. So if you have one of the inexpensive knives that you mentioned, let's say the steel happens to be quite soft. If you put an acute angle, let's say 10 degrees on either side, that knife won't hold up. As you're cutting and chopping and hitting the cutting board, or you run into a chicken bone, the edge will bend and deflect because the material is not structurally sound to be able to withstand that super thin edge. And yeah, there's a lot of angles that get thrown around. If you have a good quality knife, let's say a Zwilling piece, you're able to put on a much thinner angle, which then means you have much less resistance, cutting resistance, as you're going through the food. You still need to be somewhat careful that you can't be reckless with it because the edge is quite thin. It's only 10 degrees on either side. Some of the older style chef's knives, the material wasn't as hard as it is today. Therefore, the angles that they would put on those knives tended to be more like 20, 22, 25 degrees. So now you've got a much stronger edge on a softer material. So in Japan, when a kitchen knife maker would make a blade, they would sharpen the blade to some extent, but they wouldn't finish it because they felt it was up to the chef to become familiar with the new tool that they just bought. So when the chef would get the new knife in, then you would look at it, you would know which process you were going to use that for, and you would apply the angle that you wanted on that knife. In the meantime, as you're sharpening that blade, you know your sharpening stones because you've had the sharpening stones for 10 years, 20 years, and you know how they cut on your other knives. And so now you have this new knife and you're sharpening it, you begin to get a feel for the maker's work, how hard the steel is, how quickly it sharpens. So there's a familiarity that is built in. And you may go and use that knife and then make an adjustment to the angle on the steel so that you may use it and find, I think I can make this thinner so that it cuts more efficiently. In the same way that you adjust your spices, you make a dish and you decide I'm going to put in this much saffron or rosemary, and then you eat the dish and you go, next time I think I'll throw 2 pinches in. That's what the changing the angle on your knife is about. And so we're kind of diving deeper into the world of the culinary arts in making a differentiation between this saucepan and this saucepan because of the way it conducts heat. Some people, they're both the same. They're both saucepans.
I completely understand what you're saying. Actually, one of the truths that you reveal right now that I found extremely interesting is the understanding that in the older days, because of the softness of the metal, that did not have the technical advancements. So now, at 20 degrees, quite a spread, which means the point has to be so sharp that when you cut through it, it glides off the other side. But when it's so thin, it cuts so much faster through it. So amazing to think how many chefs in the past who must have been incredibly skillful in everything that they did, they actually had inferior instruments of what we do have now in the common kitchens at home. That's an equation that never got to my mind. But one of the things that I think is a tragedy in the industry is that points of sales encourage the sale. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. I'm a salesman too. Yeah. But nobody helps with the upkeep.
Right.
And there's a few small companies now that are coming into the web that are offering. A Knife Aid is one of them that I use very efficiently. There's an enormous amount of independent people that often go to the markets. But now with this COVID situation, I don't think it's going to be all that easy to do it. But I wish that the sell companies, the companies that sell those knives, would equipate it as consumers with an easy solution, because every knife eventually is going to be somewhat dull. Yeah. You can only align it for so long. It gets to a point that after so much use, the knife will not cut as sharp. But the knife, once it's sharpened properly and correctly, and I had some knives that I was ready to throw away, and my wife says, why don't you just take it to the shop? And this was about 9 months ago. Yeah. I said, okay, fine, I'll go. We have a fresh market that takes place not too far away from my home. And one of the things that I like is there's all these cool things. I remember in the old days when I was a little boy, there was this one guy with the cart that used to come into our neighborhood and go, Arrotino! He would walk the street. Arrotino means sharpener, no? In Sicilian dialect. And so the people would come down and there would be a line of the ladies or the ladies that work for the ladies. They had their knives in their hand and he would go, would make them, then he would bring them back. So that was part of what was commonly done that everybody did, even though they were not Damascus knives. Those are very fairly cheap knives, I'm sure. But once you sharpen them, man, those suckers are fast and they're remarkable. Who knew that one day I would actually be so much in love with knives per se and what they can actually do for us. But I must ask you this, the Nakiti knife, which is a strange shape, it's almost like a rectangular block with a handle.
Yeah.
Now, I have not learned how to use this knife right, and I know it's a great knife. I'm thinking maybe I'm using it for the wrong reasons. What is the Nakiti designed for exactly?
It's more of an Asian style cooking, more Japanese style cooking, where it's kind of a chopping action rather than a slicing action. So it's straight down like that, and then you can scoop it. You know, it's wide enough that you can scoop the food and put it into a bowl or put it into a pan. But it's chopping action, like
chopping. Okay, yeah. Everybody, listen to this. I've had this Nakiti knife now for the best part of 9 months, and I've been using it wrong all the time. Thank you. Yeah. You all have to understand that just because I got a show on TV, I'm not a genius. I've been using it the wrong way. I knew I was doing a mistake because this knife is too beautiful not to work like the other knives. And exactly what I was doing was always slicing it like this, and I was not getting the flow. When I describe the flow in the word that I say is when you use the knife and the knife moves with you and your fingers move, it's like a song, you know, it's like a piece of music. That knife and I are always at odds. It's like we have fights. I said, oh, what's that? Plus, I don't want to pick up a fight because the knife is sharp and I still got 10 fingers. I like to keep them that way. But now I understand what I was doing wrong. And this is important for all of you listening to you right now. When you think about it, you need to understand that every knife has a role, and if you take it out of the role, it might not be as much of a friend. Oh, we have a fantastic question from Koja Crowder. Thank you, guys. Question: what are your thoughts on bamboo cutting boards and cutting board material in general? I hear conflicting things, indicating a time that the bamboo will actually blunt the knife. What's your opinion on that?
So I love, as far as bamboo goes, it will dull the knife to some extent. So we used to have bamboo floors, and they give ratings to floors, to different materials, like red oak is this hardness and fir is this hardness. And so you could look at the hardness of the bamboo, and what they were measuring is the knuckle. You know how the bamboo grows and then there's a little knuckle that grows? So they were measuring the node on how hard that material is. Now, one of the reasons that bamboo makes good flooring and makes good, you know, like a fishing pole, is it's tough and flexible. There's silica in the bamboo. So the plant actually sucks up silica from the ground, and it is the plant. So if you make a board from compressed or glued up bamboo, to a small extent, it will wear your knives more. Now, certain things you should never cut on are glass. Have you seen these glass cutting boards? They're the worst. They're absolutely the worst. So no glass. Don't cut on cast iron. Don't cut on marble. Sometimes you'll see a marble cheese plate and people are cutting whatever, cured meats or something. It's terrible for your knives. So the white plastic cutting boards, they're actually quite good. They're nice and soft. You can clean them. You can run them through the dishwasher. They're great. I happen to like end grain wood boards. So instead of the side grain, I like turning the wood up on its end, and it looks almost like a checkered board, right? And if you think about wood, the way it grows, it's a bunch of fibers that are all growing together in the tree. So if we have the wood on its side, we're cutting the knife, we're dragging the knife across all of those fibers of dried wood. If you've got end grain, your knife is actually coming in between or parting the end grain of the wood. So it's more forgiving to the edge of the knife. And to some extent, a small extent, self-healing. If we cut across the grain this way, you're going to part those fibers. If you cut this way, you know, you're kind of pushing the fibers apart. So
I hope you can see my hands extended. This is meant for me to give you a hug from the other side of California and to tell you thank you.
yeah, well,
I never all my years understood, nor have I had anybody in such simple, easy to grasp language being able to explain in a non-uncertain way the exact meaning between one type of wood and the other type of wood. Oh, I'm going to tell these stories at every single party I go from now on. I mean, I'm going to come across like a genius. Really, that makes an enormous amount of sense. I never thought why they make such a big deal when they sell the board saying this is the end grain and they put it into advertising and then nobody takes the time to explain what that means. They say end board and that's it, like I should know all this. And look at you, how you went through. Do you know that you paint pictures when you talk? You make it easy to understand. You make a great teacher. You make a great teacher. I would love to learn from you, whatever that is. You are fantastic on how you teach things. You take complex things and you're able to create vignettes that are visual in everyday life and you make them realistic to us. Thank you for that.
my pleasure.
This is awesome. I'm so excited. All right, let's see here. I'm going to ask you another one from my... All right, this is a common question that a lot of people ask. And I know this sounds kind of silly as a question, but it's something that I would like to tackle. How are you supposed to care for a knife every time after you use it? And what is the special attention that it does need? Why don't you tell us what you do with your knives when you cook and how you keep them clean and what's your status?
Okay, so you see this magnetic board on the back. I have those in the kitchen, in our kitchen at home, because I can see the inventory. I can see all the knives. When I have knives in a block, I can't remember which knife I put where, and so I have to pull one, pull one, pull one, and this way I can see, I want the great big chef's knife, I grab it, I go to work. The other thing is when you put the knife back on that rack, I'm not harming the edge at all. There's a magnet in there and the knife just sticks to the side, so the edge is protected. What I'm thinking about most of the time is how do I protect this fragile little bit of material that is the leading edge of the knife. It's very small, it's very fragile, and I want to take care of that because that gives me the performance of the knife. And so I think about what I'm cutting on, how I'm trying to just think about cutting through the food and not slamming the knife into the board. I don't chop heavily because then I might be damaging the edge. I try to observe carefully and have a feeling. How's the knife cutting through the tomato, the chicken breast, the banana? Is it performing? Is it cutting well? And when I notice that the performance starts to drop a little bit, that's the time to pick up the hone and put it on a ceramic or put it on a sharpening steel to bring the edge back. And so I'll steel it, or I use a ceramic at home. I'll put the ceramic on the tabletop. I'll do maybe 10 strokes per side, narrow angle, like 10 degrees on either side, and then go back to cutting. And I should see an increase in performance. Otherwise, my technique with the ceramic was not good, or the knife may be beyond honing.
And it needs to be sharpened at that point.
So now I need to put it on a stone. And so then if I go to the stone, and if you stay on top of your knives, it maybe only takes less than 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes to put a new edge on.
Well, we have you on the air, and I'm going to ask you something because I don't know the answer. I really don't know. And there are, for example, honing machines that they're selling. They're basically piece of plastic with a handle. They have 2 slots. You slide on one side, you slide on the other side. They tell you to do it 2 times on one side, 2 times on the other. Now I've seen them come out with 3 slots. I don't have one of those yet. I haven't tested it. I tested another machine that they call it the Viennese slide. It's like 2 pieces of metals between a swing that has some elasticity. You run the knife through, and this X basically, as it feels, are these things, do you consider this efficient, or do you consider this destruction pieces to encourage you to buy a new knife?
It depends, because there's a couple different styles. So the one that you set on the countertop, there's no flexibility, and there's 2 hard metal pieces in there, and you drag your knife through. Those chunks of material, it's tungsten carbide. It's one of the hardest things on the planet. It's just below diamond. And when you drag your knife through there, it is scraping material off of either side of the edge to create a new edge, and it's a little too aggressive for my taste. For some people, if they're not interested in learning how to use a stone, or they don't have a quality professional sharpener nearby, that might be a good choice for them, because it will definitely improve the cutting ability of your knife. The other one that's kind of springy with the two rods in there, those rods are usually ceramic. They're very small white ceramic rods.
Yes, correct.
And so they're attempting to do the same thing that you would do with a honing steel in front of you. They're attempting to align the edge. The problem is they're quite small, and usually your knife has a little bit of oil on it. Even if you just cleaned it and wiped it, there's usually still some oil on there. And when you drag it through those two rods, they load up. They actually become dirty. And so they'll still align a little bit, but the abrasive quality has been eradicated, essentially. So I think the return on those is not great. And then for the electric sharpeners, just be careful, because they remove a lot of material.
They eat that knife. You use it the wrong way, the knife goes for lunch with the plastic thing. I unfortunately have witnessed that myself. I destroyed one of my favorite zwilling knives that way. It was a tragedy for me.
And it'll change the shape of the blade.
Yes, exactly. That's the thing that ruined it for me. I mean, look, I knew that I was going to make a mistake somewhere along the way, so I did take the chance with it because I wanted to learn how. I just purchased the machine. It was the new improved model.
Yeah.
And so I put it in. I was seeing all these sparks flying out. I'm thinking, wow, I'm in action. I know what I'm doing. By the time I take the knife out, I go, whoa, what happened here? The blade was gone. It looked like the machine was hungry. I could have given meatballs. I would have kept the knife. It was horrible, horrible. To this day, when I tell this story, I cry inside.
If there are 3 slots, don't use number 1, because it is the most aggressive.
I found out that.
Number 1, number 2, number 3. Just go number 2, number 3. Don't use number 1.
Well, I'm glad that you told me that, because usually I keep this story secret because I don't want people to think that I'm an idiot. But trust me, most of my intelligent choices come from idiotic mistakes. And if there is something that I can say to people is, whatever it is that you love, whatever your passion is, if you want to cook, if you maybe are inspired by what my guest, Mr. Kramer himself, is sharing with us, and you find what he says is fascinating, and you would like to try a career in metallurgy that connects to the making of culinary tools, you are bound to understand that in the things that you're going to do, mistakes are going to be the primary things. And you got to get over this thing that you cannot make mistake, because if you start your life thinking that whatever you touch is going to be right from the beginning, you're a moron. I'm telling you this. Go talk to your mom and dad. They'll tell you the same thing. So when something goes wrong, I want you to look at it that way. I remember once I had an issue with a friend of mine who I gave him 1,000 lire. I don't recall what 1,000 lire was worth in dollars right now, but let's say it was something like $2. So a really minimum amount. And we were in elementary school. I remember that because I was still wearing my uniform going to school. And this boy doesn't pay me back. And I'm taking it personal. Plus, being Sicilian, not getting paid back on a debt, that's a thing you don't want to go through. So I go to my dad, and he says to me, Nicolino, what are you worried about? He says, Dad, he took $2 from me. I say, Nick, that was cheap. It took you $2 to figure out what a moron is. Imagine if you give him $100,000. And that is forever what I always refer to as the importance of making mistakes. If you understand what you've done wrong, how you can correct it, how you can go back at it, how you can change the pattern, especially in cooking, that's very easy to do, much more difficult in metallurgy because you have to say towards certain stringent things. I guarantee you that whatever you apply this type of discipline in life, you will succeed. You will succeed because in the end, we all want the same thing. We want to be better about what we do. We want to be relevant in the field that we occupy professionally. And we want for people to be happy with what we do. I guarantee you that these folks that you see that are so full of ego, they go around insulting everybody, how long is that going to last? And what's the point? I mean, I like to talk to people. I'm sure that I'm shy by nature, but I force myself to talk to everybody, and especially girls. When I was in college, one of the things that I did, I was the guy that would stand in front to make sure we talk to the girls. All these boys are afraid to talking to girls. I said, what are you, crazy? Look how beautiful they are. Same thing. So next time you're shy, you think you cannot be done, you go and talk. And it's amazing what happens when you engage in a conversation with people. There's more things that keep us together. the things that keep us apart. Joy, passion, love, taste, family especially, the way we relate to our children, to our cats, to our dogs, to our wives, to our husbands, is equal for all of us. And I hope that today, as I stole in this huge hour away from Mr. Kramer, you see how in a man of worldwide success and the skill that, in my opinion, is comparable to a Michelangelo of his profession, we have a modest man, a man that can paint pictures, that can bring you into this trip of his, explaining to you why and the reason how these blades come together. So my encouragement to you is always ask questions. And whenever it's possible in life that your condition financially allows you to do it, and there is a tool that you love, buy it. Because one day you'll be going to the other side, and the last thing that you want to say is, darn it, I wish I bought that knife. I did. So that's off of my list.
Right.
Signor Kramer, I can only tell you this. I wish I had met you before. We had worked in the same city for so many years, and I was too stupid to know about you. And for that, I apologize. That is my complete fault. I hope that destiny will bring me an opportunity with another television series to come and do a show together, because I truly found you one of the most polarizing, fascinating, and one of the greatest storytellers I've ever interacted with. And thank you for your knife. You make me happy. And now I'm going to shut up because I want you to say what you want to say to the people who listen to us all this time. And I say my thanks.
Well, I thank you so much for inviting me. It's really been a pleasure. I wish we had gotten together when we were in the same city, but we'll have another opportunity. And thanks everybody for tuning in and the great questions. And, if you have more questions, just send an email. And thanks again for having me. I appreciate it.
Goodbye, everyone. And thank you for joining us, Signor Kramer. È stato un piacere. Arrivederci e grazie.